I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avasec Communications and host of StrategyCast. Join me and my guests, innovators, disruptors, and visionaries, as we explore bold and brave marketing strategies that help you transform, scale, and grow your brand. We're diving into a conversation today that every marketer navigating AI needs to hear. I'm joined by Tahnee Perry, a brilliant strategist with a passion for turning AI theory into real, actionable marketing strategies. We dig into what it really takes to lead AI adoption, overcoming inconsistent implementation, building AI-ready teams, and creating human AI partnerships that actually drive results. Tahnee brings sharp insights and practical frameworks that make the future feel a lot more doable. If you're ready to move beyond the hype and start using AI to accelerate growth, this one's for you.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Welcome to StrategyCast. I'm absolutely thrilled to be talking all things AI today with Tahnee Perry. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Well, I tell you, I am equally excited. We talk a lot about AI on the show, and today we're going to dive into strategies, leadership strategies for implementing AI on marketing teams. So really, really cool topic. Before we get there, Tahnee, tell us a little bit about your journey and really what led to your passion. You consult all over the place now regarding AI. What led to that passion?
Now, I'm definitely an AI nerd, and I always love the opportunity to talk about it. And it's a very popular topic. Luckily for me, I got into this because I have a background in marketing, and I started to see how AI was impacting our work. And this was back in 2022. And we were doing a lot of experimenting as a part of my team. And over time, I realized it was just such a big area. And everyone had questions about it, and no one was really answering them. And I felt like that was an opportunity for me to really geek out and learn everything I could about AI. And so I decided to start my own agency, A25. And what I do is I help companies and teams figure out how AI works and how to implement it at their team. So I like to take AI theory and turn it into practice. And so that's where I am today.
Well, and along the way, you get a lot of questions and some good questions that we're going to talk about downstream. But why, why are so many teams struggling with inconsistent adoption within, in an inside team or an agency even setting? There's, you've got your early adopters, you've got your, fear of missing out people, and then you've got people that are like, no way.
So I think that, everybody's at a different point in their journey when it comes to AI. And a lot of the teams that I consult with, it's everyone from absolute beginner. They really don't know anything about it, all the way up to those people who are really proactive and leaning in and doing a lot of experimenting and application in their work. And I think for leaders, because a lot of your listeners are team leaders and VP, right, the challenge they have is like, how do you figure that out when you have such a diverse set of skills? And I see a lot of leaders, they don't spend enough time thinking about how they can customize their programs and their approach to account for all those different types of skill sets. And so my recommendation is always take a little bit of time and figure out where your team is at today, where you want them to be tomorrow, and then plot the course they can take to get there.
And do you think that's, it sounds really basic, but it's a cultural shift, and a lot of people are dealing with that. Do you feel that is where most marketing leaders are struggling with their teams, or are there other areas that come into play there?
That to me is the main one, and it's really about change management. I think surprisingly, people forget about it. They just think, okay, we can slap an AI solution on top of this and it'll all be fine. We'll get this shiny new platform or tool and everyone will use it. But what they forget is that going from not using AI in your workflows is very different from then using AI as part of your workflows. They have to help their teams bridge that gap. And so if they don't account for that gap in the middle, thinking about what are the steps we need to take, what training do they need, what guidelines should we put in place, what tools do they need access to, there's no way for them to bridge that gap. So I do think change management is the biggest challenge they have.
Yeah, it makes sense too, because it's novel and well, it's not so, it is novel. What it's doing is very, very novel, but it's not so new anymore. You mentioned that inconsistency a moment ago. How can leaders create more of that unified approach?
You mean in their training or
just adoption?
Well, I I'm biased because I'm an AI trainer, so I feel like AI training is one of the key things that leaders can put in place, and they can either do it homegrown, they can find people within their own team that are really proactive and have some of the answers and build it that way, or they can hire someone like me, or there's other folks that are industry specific to help them through that process. The second thing I think they need to do is create an AI readiness index for their company so that they know where they are and then where, they can assess their readiness level, if you will, and then check in on that regularly so that they know they're making progress. I see a lot of programs stall out. They get really excited in the beginning and they're like, we're going to do this and we're going to be AI everything. And then they forget to keep the momentum going and they don't check where they are, and it kind of loses steam and everybody just goes back to the way they were doing it before.
Yeah. So there's an interesting level set that I want to make now during our conversation. I should have brought this up earlier. There is a lot of discussion about AI replacing marketing positions. My whole point of view is that the efficiency that we create allows us to do much larger strategic programs and implementation and, fill the gaps, on things that we're not currently getting to now. And we know that there's a ton of it. And you are also a strong proponent of developing a team that are actually comprised of AI, not individuals, but AI personas. So you might have a team of 10 humans and 5 AI personas that are a part of that team as well. Talk to us, if you will, about, this is a two-part question, where it is that the leadership isn't necessarily utilizing AI from a true strategic standpoint. They're saying, let's just write a piece of content or let's get these 5 posts out. They're not using it from a big picture analytics data standpoint. And then how can you back in some of those positions with an AI persona?
Yeah, it's a great question and thought process because that's where we're headed. We are headed towards a world where the workplace is hybrid and it's human AI partnerships. And team leaders, you need to be thinking about, well, how do I build that? Because there's not really a lot of use cases for it at the moment. So you need to really pioneer that process. And if you are still thinking very tactically, like you mentioned, where you're just like, create 5 blogs or create these graphics or speed up my video production, that's helpful. It's helping your team be more efficient. But I think where you need to go next is, how do you think about this from an overarching strategic point of view? How do you create structures and processes for your team where you're elevating the entire workflow? Right. And I've worked with a couple of teams where they've really started to think about this. And the simplest way is to put your org chart up on a page and have a look at all the different roles you have and what they do and what tasks belong to each of those. And then go in and say, okay, what set of tasks could be done by AI? And create a bucket for those and go through your entire org structure doing that. And then find solutions. And what we've seen is it's so easy to do and simple, and anyone can do this today. You can go into ChatGPT and build yourself custom GPTs, and you can make them for each discrete specific task. So one client that I'm working with, they're a global team and they do a lot of translation, and they were previously hiring live translators, was costing quite a lot in their budget. And the review time was weeks because you would have to send it off. They would translate it. It would come back. It would go through all these rounds of review. What they did instead was they built themselves an internal translator GPT. So it was they thought of it as their live translator. It was AI. And now instead of going to a human, they work through the custom GPT to do all of their translation. And that little GPT sits on their org chart, like as their translator. You could do that for any of the roles in your organization.
Yeah, I love it. So first of all, our team is like loving AI. We've been on board. We've had an AI council for almost 3 years now. So we're very, very early adopters of it. And first of all, each of our chats has a custom name within the organization. Mine happens to be Amy, because Amy is a little bit older, but provides the wisdom of someone that has 40 years of experience when it comes to strategic development. And anyways, these custom GPTs, I think, are incredibly novel when it comes to a lot of data analysis and a lot of insights, and not just internal, from the outside as well. So case in point, our AI specialist, we were in a planning meeting for a client at one point 3 or 4 months ago, and we were really trying to understand some additional insights regarding the buyer and if pricing was a roadblock to them purchasing product from this particular retailer. And, we've worked with this account for about 17 years, 37 locations, $155 million company. It's a sound company with a great marketing strategy, great ops team as well. Nonetheless, we're like, how can we analyze? We have no data at our fingertips to analyze what people are saying about the store outside of comments that are in social media and review sites. But what can we do to actually bring that all together and analyze it? So we're having this brainstorming meeting, and Colin, our AI specialist, 2 days later comes back and says, I have a solution. He built a custom chat that brought all of the review sites in, all 14,000 reviews, into a single chat. And by the way, it updates automatically when new reviews come in. And we can go in and ask it a question about pricing, and it queries all the number of comments about pricing, the negative sentiment versus positive sentiment, and then very, very specific quotes about pricing. We thought, okay, this is great. But what about timing? What if people said this 5 years ago and they're not saying it now? So now it's all time gated as well. So now it tells us, month by month when these comments are coming in, so we know if we've got an additional problem that might be brewing. That's a use case of AI and a framework that has been highly strategic for us in developing insights that helps us come up with messaging and strategies that is far greater for our clients, instead of just guessing or doing a research study that's going to take 4 or 5 months.
Exactly. I love that use case. And if you don't have the automations built in, let's say, for example, you're a tech platform and you get a lot of reviews on G2, you can just export those reviews as a PDF and do the same thing.
Exactly.
It's a little more manual. It's not quite as fancy as what you have. And maybe not everybody has a Colin, so they have to do a little bit more grunt work, but there's always a workaround.
Yeah, I love that. So AI search and SEO is, I think, the next something that's evolving really, really quickly here. What challenges are marketers facing in AI-powered search, and how should they be adapting to this?
Yeah, SEO is a very hot topic at the moment because AI search is having such a big impact on it. And there's a whole set of new search platforms popping up, like Perplexity is one of the most popular. ChatGPT is stealing market share from Google. And if you as a marketer are thinking about how you're getting traffic to your website, you have to be aware of these changes. Right. And it's early days. I think we're still figuring out how the chatbots like ChatGPT and Perplexity are interacting with our content, but there's some early indicators that suggest that context is really important. And what that means is the chatbot needs to understand what your content means in relation to everything else, because they're answering a question. And so you can't just have like very short form content. You need to have much longer articles and guides that give the entire picture. And then you also need to support them with a set of articles or pages that all link together. Because the LLM is visiting all of that and deciding, is this an authoritative site? Does it have a lot of content? Does the content sound like it's going to answer the question? So you have to build all of that out so that you have this ecosystem of supporting content. And then what you need to do is you need to make sure that the site is crawlable by the LLMs. It's actually surprising the number of people who still block that. So make sure your technical SEO is in order, because the LLM needs to get access to provide an answer. And then create the content in a way that makes it easy for the LLM or the chatbot to serve up that content. So FAQs are really popular because the LLM, if someone asks a question and it goes out onto the internet and finds that question and the answer right there, it's much more likely to serve that up in the results.
I love that. This is just an inquisitive mind question. Regarding search, are they actually searching Google for SEM ads to become a part of the search query as well?
Not that I've heard of. No one I've talked to, and I've had a lot of conversations in the last, say 6 months, and nobody's mentioned ads being a part of the search, I guess, parameters. What I will say is Perplexity have indicated that they will serve ads in their platform, but they'll build relationships with advertisers who will then serve that content. But I don't think they're searching Google's SEM ads.
Okay. Yeah, that would be.
Who knows though what's coming?
I know. You don't know. That's just it, right? They're definitely keeping us on our toes. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to tackle some of the most common questions that you're getting from marketing leaders today. And first up here is, how do you really build that AI ready team? This is one of the most common questions you're getting.
Yes, because I think people are really struggling with it, and it's a big pain point. And I think also people are feeling a lot of fear and uncertainty, and like they're very anxious because they know that, this has been a topic now for a couple of years. So if you aren't already proactively in this, then you really need to get moving. A year ago, when people asked me, I was like, it's okay. You've got some time, sit back.
No longer.
No, I'm like, no. You need to really get moving if you're not already. So I give folks, I give them usually 4 things they need to focus on as a leader. And the first is creating a shared vision. You need to sit down and think about, what does that look like for you, your team, and your organization? What's the ideal process look like? What does the ideal team makeup look like? And you have to make that really clear so that you can share that with everyone and you all have that shared goal. The next is investing in training. I already mentioned, I think I do meet some leaders who are like, oh, my team is really smart, they'll figure it out. I mean, yes, maybe, but they're really busy with their day job. So you should at least help them in some way and make it a part of their assessment criteria. Like, did you take a training, or did you do this course? What have you been doing day to day? The next thing is you also have to have a culture of experimentation. There's a lot of fear around doing the wrong thing. And when people operate in fear, they're much less likely to experiment or try something new, and they'll go back to their old ways. So as a leader, you have to say, look, it's okay to make a mistake as long as it's in this field, right? Don't put your mission critical tasks in the experimentation box, because then that's just not a good outcome. So you need to identify, like, what are the areas where we're comfortable if this doesn't work out so well, and let's experiment there. And then finally, measure your impact, because your stakeholders are going to come back to you and say, what are you doing with AI, and is it working? And if not, what are you going to do to change that? And as a leader, if you don't measure the process as you go along, you aren't going to be able to answer to your stakeholders or your board. And there's nothing worse than not having that answer. And so I'd say measurement is that final piece that kind of brings it all together.
That's the icing on top of the cake right there. We have a tag up every morning, and each morning, everyone in the tag up needs to report on the efficiency they gained utilizing AI the day before, and what it allowed them to do. And it's like a reporting KPI that we have, in everyone's goals for the years, all that sort of stuff. And when you're talking, the biggest point here is when you begin to build a culture of AI usage, not for taking shortcuts, but for creating efficiency and, creating some stronger insights. I mean, the data dump can be done far more quickly when it comes to a research study or something like that, and really analyzing those sort of things than the human eye can. And it just provides you that great, great, great direction, instead of it does have some good answers, but the great direction it provides you to really then parallel the human spirit with AI is where we see the big, big benefit. So with all that said, how do you create that culture of constant learning and that culture of AI usage not being a scapegoat or not being a way to cheat the system so that you can leave work early, but really that culture of utilizing it for the better, the good of humanity, really.
I love what you're doing with your team and your company and making it part of your everyday. There's a lot of research out there that shows that if you want to foster AI skills, it needs to happen very often, if not every day, then at least a couple of times a week. And the fact that you're already talking about it and making it part of that daily conversation means that the people in your team are much more likely to think about it instead of saying, oh, I'll do that at the end of the week, or I'll do that right before I have my review call, and I'll rush around and try to, pull something out last minute. You're weaving it into daily conversations. I think a great example I've seen organizations use is dedicating a set amount of time at each meeting, whether it's a daily stand-up or if they're weekly, where someone showcases a success. And it's just like you said, what did you do yesterday that made me better? You could assign a team member to say, okay, you need to walk someone through the steps you took, either using a tool or changing your process. And then the team can have a discussion about it. The other thing they should also do is it shouldn't just be success stories, because we know that when you start something new, there will be failures and there will be things that don't go so well. So talk about those as well. And that way you normalize this idea of it's okay to fail as long as it's not catastrophic. It's okay to fail if you learn something, and you make that a little more comfortable for the rest of your team. And then finally, I'd say you should definitely define the guardrails. So again, if it's mission critical, these are the areas that have to stay within the process we already have defined, but everything else is greenfield and go for it.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have an example of a client or someone in industry that you've read about that's doing a great job really integrating AI on the team, and how is it benefiting them?
I have a client specifically who I've been working with now almost 2 years, and the things they're doing right, they started at the beginning, they started early, which I think is very helpful. They took a very thoughtful process to the entire, I guess, program, where they started at the top and they got buy-in from their board and their executive team. And then they went level down to their team leaders. And they spent some time talking to their team leaders about what they were thinking, what they were planning, and they got their feedback. And then they went to the entire team. It was about 60 people, and they conducted a whole series of workshop training, and they did it by, role and department. So I think that was helpful, because instead of it feeling very high level and theoretical, it was like, here's how it applies to your job.
Right.
And then they would have regular check-ins. So we work every month or two, we have a check-in. We do open office hours where people can come and be like, I am having this problem. What can I do? And they gave them access to all the tools. They gave them licenses. It's part of their KPIs, and it's having a huge impact on their overall efficiency and success. They're saving thousands of dollars every quarter on their budget, probably hundreds of thousands.
That can be used in outbound marketing or, just all sorts of unique ways.
Exactly.
What is the right mix? This is such a loaded question. And I know that there's not a silver bullet for this by any stretch of the imagination, but is there the right mix of AI team members to human team members? Is it 20%? Is it 50%? How does that break down, and what are some of those common roles?
That's a great question. I don't have the answer to, because I've never really thought about it in percentages. I think it depends. I know this is a scapegoat answer, but it depends a little bit on the role.
Right.
I still think AI right now is really good with text. It's getting better with design and graphics, and is still not usable for video, as an example, right? So if your team If all you're doing is video production, what I'm hearing is teams are still frustrated. Like even Sora, which is considered the best text to video generation platform, doesn't have any continuity. So it's not like you can go in there and say, create me a demo video for my customer with these 3 pain points. You're not going to get something, right? You still have to go back to your manual process or your traditional process, is probably a better way of putting it, to build those videos. But if you're writing blogs, you're going to lean much more heavily on your chatbot because you can do ideation and planning and brainstorming. You can even get a first draft. I mean, I never recommend cutting and pasting because it just doesn't read well, but there's so many elements of your process that you can have AI help you. I would say maybe it's more like 50-50 or 60-40, but for video, it's probably more like 10-90.
Yeah, if that, right? That's great. I mean, that's one of the things that I think a lot of marketing leaders are going to be considering over the next many, many years is just what is the right mix and what problem are we currently experiencing on our team and how can AI help fill that would probably be a better way to look at it. One of the other questions I know you get quite often regards tech stacks because they can be completely overwhelming. What is your advice for optimizing the MarTech stack to integrate AI in the most effective way possible?
A lot of the teams that I work with have a tendency to chase that shiny object, and there's a plethora of new tools coming out. There's a MarTech report that comes out early in the year, and I think we're up to like 14,000
Gosh.
different marketing platforms. I mean, I don't know how anyone could keep up with it. It's immense. And so there's this tendency to be like, oh, I want that project, I want that platform is going to solve this problem. But what I recommend doing instead is sitting down and laying out all of the tools that you currently have, because depending on your team, you might have a really robust platform in place. And it's surprising how many of these tools are launching and releasing their own AI functionality built in. A great place to start is with your CRM because it is connected to so much else of your marketing and sales ecosystem. And the 2 big ones there, you've got Salesforce and HubSpot. They both have AI now built in, and they're releasing more every day. So I would start with your bigger platforms, see what they have, and then if there are gaps, identify what they are and go look for a specific solution that you can plug in to fix, to handle that use case that you have missing. The one thing I would say is make sure it integrates with everything else and it's not a standalone.
I mean, they're kind of like the top 4 accounting firms. There's really the top 4 generative AI tools that are used out there right now. Is there an AI tool that you're eyeballing and just waiting to and excited to try out?
Oh, So I'm a solopreneur, and I think my needs are a little bit different from someone who's running a team, especially if it's a larger team where you have some of that enterprise level tech.
Wow.
And I probably experiment with a new tool every week. And I usually, if they're the self-service type, I get my hands on it and I get in there and I test it out. If it's enterprise level, usually what I do is I'll get in touch with the sales team and have them give me a demo. The one platform I'd really like to get my hands on, but it's not really at my level, is something called Glean. And it is an enterprise, it's across the entire organization. And it's a big lift to get it implemented. But then what it does is you load all of your documentation into it, you plug in all of your applications, and then people can have a conversation, a knowledge conversation. You can ask about meetings, you can ask about products and solutions, and you can get into your analytics. And it solves that problem of not having the answer for something. Like if you use Outlook or Gmail, have you ever had to search for an email? You know it's in your inbox and you cannot find it.
And you know what the keywords are too. And then when you do find it, the keywords you're using are right as well.
They're right there.
Exactly.
A platform like Glean solves that problem.
Wow, that's nice. That would really save me, by the way. I love it. I wanted to talk about a success story, and we talked a little bit about a client earlier, but you're working with a SaaS platform where AI has saved nearly $500,000 a year. Can you share a little bit more about how they've done that?
It's very similar to what we talked about with the earlier example. It is a larger team, right? So they have a fairly robust budget, and they went through a similar process where they trained their entire team and gave them access to all the tools and also gave them the time to experiment. And they did an assessment where they analyzed each of the workflows and where there was a very heavy spend or it was very time intensive and a lot of humans involved in the flow. And I'm trying to think of a good example. I think video production was one of the examples that we helped them work through, where they did video content. Everybody loves it. It's got great engagement on social, but it's very time intensive. And they had a traditional video team, but the review process was taking about 6 weeks. Because what would happen is they would ideate, and then they would go away and they would create a storyboard, and then they would come back and look at the storyboard, and they would go through all these different realms until finally, 6 weeks later, they had a draft to look at.
Wow.
What we did was we said, what if you could bring that all, the storyboard, the ideation and storyboarding all into one session, and you can use a combination of ChatGPT to help you with the ideation, and people can kind of brainstorm with the ChatGPT, outputs, and then use a combination of DALL-E and Canva to build the storyboard on that right while you're there. And so you would put prompts into DALL-E and it would create these storyboards, and then you could edit them and improve on them in Canva. And they were doing this in a 30-minute meeting. And so it saved them like 4 weeks in their production cycle.
That's absolutely incredible. It's interesting. I was reading some stats earlier today, and 88% of marketing teams have implemented AI. Now, that's a really, really broad statement, right? Because AI is in your CRM. So you inherently are using AI there. So I haven't dove deeper into that stat. It seemed really, really high to me based on the integrated and the cultural shift that we're talking about when it comes to truly implementing AI in a big, big way for teams to create efficiency and better insights and better data and output, so on and so forth. So there are some teams that just really that are just getting started on this, or just are not orchestrated well yet. What advice do you have for them about the first process they should get started on in implementing AI for their team?
Yeah, it depends on the size. So if you are a small team, I'd say get your whole team together and sit down and talk about what you would like to achieve, and put that down in writing. And this is where you want to go. And then you could even allocate roles to each of your team members and say, I want you to take an element of the process. So somebody could look at tools, another person could look at process, another team could look at like, what are the risks that we have to keep in mind? Like, do we handle sensitive client data? So how do we make sure that we're protecting that? And how do we be in compliance? And so you get the whole team involved and you do it as a group effort. If you have a larger team, I would say break it down and start with your upper management and do something similar, where you make sure that they understand that this is a corporate priority and they're going to be involved and you need their feedback. And then you also need to work with them to make sure that they are champions for this process. And you're going to lean on them to make sure that they get their team all the things they need, whether it's training or KPIs they have to be tracking. Because if you can get that upper management level involved and working with you, you're much more likely to succeed.
How often are you seeing that leadership is driving this versus team members?
Depends a little bit on the culture. I find if you have an open culture, one that's encourages experimentation, it can bubble up from anywhere. And you always find, like, every company has that one or two people who are like, I know everything there is to know about AI. Like, I get on these training programs and the person's like, know that, I know that, I'm using that tool. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I feel like those companies should really be leaning on those people, because they're taking their own initiative to go figure this out.
Right.
That said, there are other companies where it's, I don't know, insurance or banking, or there's something, it's a very structured
Different mindset.
industry. It is completely different. The employees are like, I'm going to wait and see what the regulation is and what the rules are before I do anything.
Right.
And in those cases, it has to come from top down.
How often are you seeing, I mean, like 18 months ago, I heard quite a bit of fear from an organizational standpoint of companies not allowing teams to utilize AI due to, private things that they might be sharing, number one, or to the um, open, what's it referred to? Open source data input or something like that, that a lot of AI is built from. They didn't want their proprietary details shared. And of course, there's all sorts of solutions that protect us with that today. But where are you seeing that juxtaposition? Like, I guess, how often are company policies not allowing AI implementation?
What I've seen happen is the companies that did not allow their employees to use tools like ChatGPT, they have gone out and built their own large language model, which is great because they now have a closed system. It's probably powered by OpenAI, but it's completely walled and the employees are free to go in there and use it however they like. So they have a very structured playground, if you will. So I think there are the organizations with very rigid structures, and what they've done is they've found a solution that works for them. And then other companies who are more open, I think they always were, and they're like, just go use it, just make sure you don't put any PII in there, you just be safe, be careful, but they're much more relaxed. And I also think OpenAI has done a lot of work to create some guardrails inside the platform. So I think teams that are worried about things like privacy and compliance, you can upgrade to the pro level, and then your data is much more protected. And then you can also, there are settings within ChatGPT where you can say, do not use my inputs as training data, do not share this. And so there's a few more safeguards now. So I'm actually seeing that a lot more teams are open and using it than they were.
That's wonderful. I love it. I'm really glad to hear about it. What do you know today that you did not know 30 or 60 days ago about AI?
Ooh. I mean, I feel like every day I wake up and there's something new and it's so tough to keep up. I do this as my day job and I'm like, oh, it's a lot. Like, I'm constantly listening to podcasts and trying to stay on top of the developments in all of the large language learning models and all of the engineers and the tech. But what didn't I know? I think the one thing that's coming up more now is the move to AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. And that's when AI becomes smarter than we are. And I have definitely noticed in my day-to-day work, I use ChatGPT quite a lot, and it just gets incrementally better every day. And so I can see that it's coming much sooner than I think we ever expected, because there were conversations 60 days ago where they were like, oh no, it's 5 or 10 years in the future. I think we might see it this year or next.
I love it. Do you think that will take care of some of the context issues that people experience with a solid output and even some of the hallucination?
Ooh, it may help with the context. I don't think it'll help with the hallucination, because LLMs by nature tend to hallucinate. They have actually shown though that they're improving incrementally. But someone asked me this on a webinar today. They're like, will it ever get to the point where it's perfect? I just don't see that ever happening. So if you are working on a task that requires 100% accuracy, an LLM or a chatbot may not be your go-to. You may want to look at other technologies. But if you have a little wiggle room for like, okay, maybe it's not 100, like maybe it's 98, then you might be okay.
I love that. That is fantastic. As you know, we're up on time here. I've got to ask you one more question. We launched in January this series called Better At, and the Better At series is helping marketers to become better at something so that they can positively impact their team, positively impact their the audience that they're marketing to, their family, whatever it might be. I think marketers have an incredible opportunity to do that. So as a part of this Better At series, what is one thing that marketing leaders can do to be better at leading AI adoption with their teams?
Set the example. I see cases where the CMO or the VP are like, okay, team, go off and figure this out and come back and tell me what you think. And I think that works to some extent. But if you really want to integrate AI adoption into your team and your day-to-day so that everybody is getting benefits, you need to walk the talk, as they say. And you need to tell that story. You need to talk to your team about what you did, why it worked or didn't work, what you're going to do next, and have a conversation around that, because then it becomes very real and concrete and practical, and it's not just an idea. And also, I think when the team see you embodying what you want, they're much more likely to follow your example.
I love that. That is fantastic. Thank you. Tahnee, what is the best way for our audience to get in contact with you?
I am on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/Tahnee Perry, but you could just search my name, Tahnee Perry. I'm on there pretty much every day of the week and post a lot of content on AI. So if you are interested, feel free to follow me. And you can also find me at my website, which is goa25.com.
That's fantastic, Tahnee. So many incredible insights today. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, email me, Lori@StrategyCast.com. Tahnee, thank you so much for your appearance on StrategyCast.
Thanks so much for having me.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.